Throughout history, China has gained notoriety for its reputation as a land where punishment for crimes was exceptionally harsh. Illustrations of the brutality prevalent in ancient Chinese dynasties can be found in its criminal code known as the 5 punishments for slaves. Ancient China. During the China Dynasty, which existed approximately 4,000 years ago, the ruling upper classes in ancient China maintained a considerable distance from the average citizens, comprising mainly peasant farmers, merchants, and craftsmen, reflecting in the norm in many countries today. The government sought methods of punishment for wrongdoing. They established the 5 punishment for slaves, which, contrary to the modernist understanding of slavery, applied to any male within the Chinese Empire. These punishments persisted throughout 4,000 years of Chinese history, representing an era known as ancient China. The Shang Dynasty, beginning in 1600 BC, marks the first recorded written history of ancient China, including the implementation of the 5 punishment for slaves. These punishments were specific measures used to discipline individuals within the society. One of the 5 punishments for slaves in ancient China was the practice of facial and head tattoos, also known as mo or qing. This punishment was regarded as an exceptionally cruel duel to the prevailing belief that marking the skin rendered an individual less than fully human. The permanent nature of these tattoos, coupled with the social stigma and ostracism from law-abiding society, intensified the cruelty of this punishment. In ancient Chinese society, physical appearance held great significance, and one's face served as a symbol of identity and social standing. By tattooing the face and head, the individual was permanently marked as a criminal or someone of low status. This visible sign of wrongdoing not only subjected the person to personal humiliation and shame, but also resulted in their exclusion from respectable society. The act of tattooing the face and head was seen as a form of degradation and a means of marking individuals as outcasts. It served as a constant reminder of their transgressions and prevented them from reintegrating into mainstream society. The combination of the physical pain endured during the tattooing process, the emotional trauma of being marked as a societal pariah, and the subsequent isolation and rejection inflicted by others made this punishment especially cruel and ostracizing. Punishment 1. Yi. Yi involved the cutting off of the offender's nose without the use of anesthetics. This brutal act inflicted immense pain and disfigurement upon the individual, leaving a permanent reminder of their crime. It was a highly degrading punishment designed to bring shame and humiliation to the offender. Punishment 3. Wei. Wei was an even harsher punishment than Yi. It involved amputating one or both of the offender's feet, rendering them crippled for life. As most ancient Chinese citizens were peasant farmers, this punishment not only brought humiliation and shame, but also made it incredibly difficult for the individual to earn a livelihood in the future. Punishment 4. Gong. Gong referred to castration, where the offender's testicles and penis were removed. Those subjected to this punishment were often sent to live as eunuchs in the imperial palace. It was a severe penalty commonly used for individuals involved in indecent behavior or those attempting to incite rebellion. Castration not only caused physical emasculation, but also stripped away the ability to have a family and heirs. The final punishment in the set of 5 punishments for slaves was darpi, also known as the death sentence or the highest punishment. This penalty represented the most severe form of punishment, resulting in the loss of the offender's life. Let's delve into the various methods of execution that were used in ancient China, known for their creativity and horrifying nature. Quartering. This method involved cutting the offender's body into 4 pieces. The limbs and torso would be separated, causing a gruesome and brutal death. Boiling alive. As the name suggests, that this execution method involves submerging the individual in boiling water or other substances, resulting in excruciating pain and ultimately causing death. Tearing apart. The offender's limbs would be tied to separate chariots or animals, and they would be torn apart when the chariots moved in opposite directions. This method aimed to inflict maximum suffering before death. Cutting in 2. The individual would be bisected vertically with their body literally cut into 2 halves. This was an exceptionally brutal and visually shocking form of execution. Ling Chi. Commonly known as death by 1,000 cuts, Ling Chi involved a prolonged and agonizing process. The offender would be subjected to numerous small cuts all over their body, prolonging their suffering until eventual death. These execution methods were designed not only to end the offender's life, but also to serve as public spectacles, intended to deter others from committing similar crimes. They were characterized by extreme cruelty, reflecting the brutal nature of punishments during ancient Chinese history. It is important to note that these descriptions involve graphic and violent acts, which may be disturbing to some readers. The use of such punishments underscores the severity and the harshness of the legal system prevailing in ancient China. While the 5 punishments for slaves formed the foundation of the penal punishment system in ancient China, it's essential to acknowledge that women had their own set of punishments, which comparatively were considered milder than those imposed on men. Let's explore the distinct penalties inflicted upon women during that era. The 5 punishments for women. One of the punishments for women in ancient China was known as yingqiang. In this penalty, the offender was compelled to grind grain. While seemingly mundane, this punishment had a psychological torment aspect to it. The women were given a specific time limit to complete the task, and if they failed, they would receive an additional bucket of grain to grind. With each subsequent bucket, the difficulty and pressure increased, as they were expected to meet the time requirements. This punishment aimed to impose psychological stress on the women, making each successive bucket more challenging to grind within the given time frame. Another punishment for women in ancient China was called zhangqing. This penalty involved the squeezing of fingers between sticks, comparable to a form of ancient thumbscrews. The women's fingers would be tightly confined between 2 sticks, which were then pulled taut by court ushers. This method was primarily used as a means to extract information or confessions. It inflicted excruciating pain and pressure on the fingers, aimed to coerce the women into revealing desired information or admitting to their alleged crimes. The relentless squeezing of the fingers between the sticks was a method of physical torment employed during interrogations or as a punitive measure. Punishment 3. Zhangqing. One of the punishments for women in ancient China was zhangqing, which involved beating with wooden staves. Women would be subjected to physical violence as they were struck repeatedly with wooden rods or staves. This form of punishment aimed to inflict pain, humiliation, and injury upon the offender. Punishment 4. Shixie, forced suicide. In some cases, women were subjected to the punishment of forced suicide, known as shixie. This involved compelling the women to take her own life as a penalty for her alleged wrongdoing. Various methods of self-execution were employed during Imperial China, including cutting one's throat, consuming poison, or hanging oneself. These methods were intended to be both a form of punishment and a means to eradicate the offender from society. The act of forcing women to end their own lives was a particularly brutal and psychologically distressing form of punishment. It aimed to exert control over the women, instill fear in others, and eliminate the need for executioners to carry out the sentence. It's important to note that the descriptions provided depict the harsh realities of ancient punishments and may be distressing. The penalties inflicted upon women during this time were often cruel, aiming to exert power and maintain social order within the hierarchical structure of Imperial China. The 5th punishment for women was confinement without food, typically imposed on those guilty of adultery or licentious behavior. They would be locked in a small room and left to either outlive their punishment or perish from starving. Over time, as dynasties changed and we moved closer to modern times, the 5 punishments for slaves underwent alterations. They were eventually abolished during the reign of Emperor Wen of Han in 203 BC to 157 BC, replaced by the less cruel 5 punishments of serf for serfs. The abolishment came about due to the appeal of Chunyu Tiying, the daughter of a high-ranking official, who highlighted the cruelty inherent in the punishments and offered to take her father's place as a slave for life. Impressed by her words, Emperor Wen abolished 4 of the punishments, eliminating all forms of mutilation and amputation from Chinese penal punishments. Instead, criminals were subjected to whipping using bamboo strips or sticks, with a number of lashes varying based on the severity of the crime. This revised system remained in place for centuries, shaping punishment in Chinese law for almost 4,000 years. It's important to note that ancient China employed different types of methods of punishment, which will be discussed in the next video. Subscribe now to our channel for more insights into gruesome punishments and intriguing historical events. Thank you so much for watching.